Hello, this is Virgil, Labrador, and Elisabeth Tweedie from Satellite Markets and Research here at the Satellite 2023 in Washington, D.C. As you all know, I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Satellite Markets and Research. We publish the Satellite Executive Briefing, and then we do occasional market briefs and tech briefs. Elisabeth is the Associate Editor and Head of our Research Division also. And she actually is more, I think, for this show, we kind of divide our task, and I pretty much cover the show floor, see what's on at the show floor, what's exciting and new in the show floor, and she attends the conferences. She also does the show floor, and I also attend some of the sessions. But for this video, we'll give a take on Satellite 2023. So before that, just a brief background. As you all know, there's been a global pandemic. The pandemic started right at the middle of the show here. 2020, yes, in March.
We were shut down.
Yes, they announced the cancellation of the show right in the middle of the show, and they came back 1 year, but it was in September, and it was in another venue, and it seems like. What are your impressions, Elisabeth? First of all, of the show itself.
I spoke to the organisers last year and was told it was the largest attendance ever.
Last year's attendance,
which is very surprising.
Ever,
yes.
Oh.
My impression this year is that it's much, much bigger than last year. There's so many more people here.
Right.
The atmosphere is much more upbeat, which is surprising actually, given all that's going on in the world at the moment.
Right, I concur with that actually, and also in my meetings and also with talks with people at the manning the booths, they see a lot more traffic. In fact, we are almost at the end of the show. There's only 1 hour left. And as you can see, there's still a lot of foot traffic around here. You know, people are trying to get as much of this as almost to the very end. Yeah. The show floor is busy. There's there's less spaces. You know, during the pandemic, there were some empty spaces.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And even last year as well, actually.
Right. That's true. So I think it's pretty much almost like this. If the organizers say that last year they already exceeded their historical high, then
I think this year's going to break records.
This is a very good indicator that for the industry, right, Elisabeth? Do you agree?
I think so. Yeah.
So, Elisabeth, in the conferences, what do you think were the highlights?
Well, the key theme that came through in almost every session, no matter what the actual topic of the session was satellite cellular convergence. I went to the NSR breakfast briefing, and a comment was made there by one of the analysts who'd been to MWC, was that every MNO was talking about satellite. Now that may be a slight exaggeration. Every MNO at MWC, right. I doubt if anyone has time
maybe
to
most
see
of
more,
them.
But even if 50% were, that is a significant change. I mean, we used to be regarded as a technology of last resort. Now, partly because of being integrated into the 5G release standard, and now release 17 has come out with the NTN, non-terrestrial network standard, it's hot, and they realise they need us and they want to talk to us, and we certainly want to talk to them.
Yeah, that's a very good point actually. A lot of the people I interviewed also mentioned that, that 5G and the telecom convergence. And actually pointed out that some of them have been to the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, which was just a few weeks ago, and that there's an increasing satellite presence there. So
I was talking to one of the other journalists who had not been this year, but his feedback was, we have to all go next year.
To the World Congress.
MWC,
Right. So So what else did you
Well, following on from that, I mean, there are two levels of that convergence. There's actually building into their networks on the ground through the teleport and integrating common standards, which is one issue which is starting to happen, and we can talk about that as well if you want. But the other issue is satellite direct-to-handset. That is creating a tremendous amount of buzz at the moment. Have Apple, who've already made the decision to move ahead with this, and in the iPhone 14 they have the satellite chip which communicates with Globalstar and does the emergency messaging. T-Mobile have signed a deal with SpaceX that they will also be integrating a satellite chip into future generations. And then we have the Samsung, Qualcomm, Iridium tie-up.
Right.
So it means that in the future, once a Qualcomm chip is produced, it will be in every Samsung phone, therefore available for any Android Samsung phone to communicate to Iridium.
Right.
Iridium is so bullish about this that they've actually, the COO, Susan McBride, said in one of the sessions that she predicted that Iridium would become a household name by the end of next year, that everyone would be talking about Iridium, which is interesting concept.
Right.
I mean, right now all of this is limited to very low bandwidth. The other approach to this, because those all use satellite frequencies, is the approach taken by Link, who are going to use the cellular frequencies, and they have agreements signed with cellular operators around the world, and they also have permission from the FCC to use those frequencies on a non-priority basis or on a non-exclusive basis in the US. Again, right now, their first generation, which should be 100 satellites when it's complete, and they've got 3 launched so far, will only be low bandwidth SMS. Their second generation, which they hope is going to be operational by the end of 2026, will be broadband.
Right.
So
yeah, that's
big
a very
big change. How much business it really is going to be, I don't know.
Right.
How much, obviously there are times when we're all without a cellular signal.
Right.
But how long are we without that cellular signal?
Yeah.
And the places in the world where they don't have the cellular coverage,
Right.
they tend not to have the income to pay for this.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting to see, how big a market this is.
Yeah.
It's very exciting technology, but what the business case is going to
The
be.
business case is difficult.
Right.
I was talking to a CEO of Link, and his attitude was, we're the wholesaler, it's incremental revenue. Our satellites are going to pass over Africa. If they only pay 1 cent a minute, that's still revenue we wouldn't get otherwise, so that's fine.
Right.
But that doesn't close a business case, 1
That's
cent a
right.
minute.
Right. So on the show floor, actually, what to me my biggest takeaway is the virtualization.
Yes,
I think
virtualization
So this
is
is
it, yeah.
the satellite show has been going for many years, decades,
Yeah.
and it's an equipment hardware show. Now it's all software. A
Right.
lot
Yeah,
of
totally.
software
Yeah.
companies. Of course, ST Engineering iDirect has been promoting their virtualization system technology.
Yep.
There's another company called Work Microwave, and they're the virtual ground stations. So where you and there are others, many. It's almost. I think that's what you see.
You've got
Virtual.
OneWeb AWS tie-up as well,
Right.
because the cloud is a lot of what's driving this. That companies, terrestrially, nothing to do with satellite,
Right.
but are using the cloud more and more for their own processing as life becomes more complex, as they hook up more devices, more people.
Right.
In step with that, we've got the existence of the LEO satellites, and how much more complex it is to actually manage a LEO satellite and all the handovers compared to one GEO that stays pretty much static.
Right.
So that drives the need for something that's handled by software, not by hardware,
Right.
and linking into the cloud where the customer's data is anywhere. So yeah, virtualization is huge.
Right. Yeah, and finally, generally speaking, you already said in the intro that the mood has been much more positive and optimistic. I concur also. That's also the feeling I have. It's really back. You see, no more masks, people shaking hands, and a lot of networking opportunities here. Everything, it's a really fun. It's a really activity-filled 3 days or 4 days, including the preliminary conference on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some ways it's surprising given the economic environment and the issues with the banks both here and in Europe now,
Right.
which I think is going to slow down investment, particularly for the early stage startups. There's going to be a lot more caution around. But traditional metrics and companies who've got those metrics, I think, are standing in good stead. I know there have been comments made about there's going to be a lot of M&A and companies are going to disappear.
Right.
There'll be some. Inevitably there will be some. There's M&A every year and companies disappear. The
Right.
new ones spring up as well.
Right, right. Well, thank you, Elisabeth. Almost all the trade publications will be reporting this if you weren't able to attend. We will also report on this. Elisabeth will be publishing an article in our April issue on the wrap-up and highlights of the show. We've seen each other at the shows for many, many years, For the benefit of our viewers who couldn't come to the show, and also are not familiar with satellite, how many years have you been coming here?
I originally came to it was called the Satellite Users Convention, Satellite Communication Users Convention. It was called SCUC.
SCUC.
It sounds like a bad name.
You're right.
But actually, it was the first one I went to was in New Orleans. And then there was another follow-up in St. Louis. And both of them were held in basements, and a couple of hundred people showed up.
Right.
Home satellite, and then we started doing some more business satellites. So
Right.
Earl Marshall was an early
I would imagine you haven't missed a satellite since the 80s, right?
Well, I've missed a few.
Oh,
sadly.
you did? Yeah.
Different things that were going on.
Right.
Middle East took a lot of our attention.
Yeah. There was a time, I remember when satellite was at the same time as CabSat.
CabSat,
Right.
and then
in
things
Dubai.
that were going on in
Right.
Iraq and Afghanistan pulled
Right.
a lot of us away. So.
Right. So, how has it changed now? I'm sure there's a lot of changes, but just from your perspective.
Well, the early shows were basically all pirates. So, the greatest pirate was at that era was Charlie Ergen. He enabled, people to receive HBO and Showtime, the movie channel, and other content with these big satellite dishes that went in the back of people's homes in the U.S. And so, that transitioned into DBS, DTH.
Right.
From DTH, we started looking at more business services. Obviously, the government was still using a lot of it, but kind of integrated those worlds together.
Right.
And I thought we really empowered one another. And I look at how Charlie Ergen, he's one of the big powerhouses in media.
Right.
And he had a vision. And a lot of these people here have had visions. And when the windows seemed like they were closing, the visionaries always see 12 new ones. So, just an amazing... caliber of people. Yeah. Very passionate about.
Right, and they're all here, right?
And they're all here, and now we have space with satellite.
Yeah.
We have, the different orbits that are going in, and I've spent a lot of time in the small sat arena.
Right.
New Media Equity is an investor in a lot of the small sat plays out there, and other situations for support technology such as encryption. And many of those types of things.
So having seen the satellite industry from almost its beginnings, and then now, as you said, it's branched into so many other things. How do you see the future?
When I did a dissertation in the early 90s.
Right.
Not too far from your school.
My alma mater.
Your alma mater.
That's in Los Angeles, by the way.
The Trojans.
We won't mention those two schools.
The Trojans. Anyway.
So you went to UCLA.
Yeah. So but anyway, I was actually at Claremont, on this particular one. But,
right.
And I was there for advertising technology, which was computational data science.
Right.
And we could see these things kind of unfolding, and that there would be a market. And to me, what occurred was government incentives, really helped move things in the U.S. at least, and other areas throughout the world, Europe and those areas. But I really think that, what was not government-driven, entertainment, had to make money on its own. So we didn't have subsidies or anything like that. So, it's just been kind of interesting. But then these orbits that have been added, who would think that I think it wasn't that long ago we had 1,000 satellites in the sky.
Yeah, about 5 years ago to be exact.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago.
I wrote an article in the Encyclopedia Britannica about the number of satellites.
And we launched
about 2,000 every year.
Yeah, every year. It's just phenomenal. So what I really see in the small sat arena that's just so exciting is the amount of youth that could go work at Google or Facebook and lose their soul.
Right.
They're coming into satellite because they're passionate. They want to make space work. They see that it changes things, that can be the solution for climate issues and many other security. All of these things that take us to the next level. I mean, we've developed interferometrics for geolocation. We're seeing now even on the Apple Watch with Globostar, which normally you would have thought that would have been a thing.
Right.
Because if we go back to that application, that was Iridium.
Right. Right.
And Iridium, when it imploded, nobody wanted to invest in the satellite markets, and now everybody wants to invest in the satellite markets because it's access. And where I was going back with my dissertation is, I wrote a dissertation that said access to bandwidth would be the moneymaker.
Right, right.
And now I'm seeing that even without access, just access is also a moneymaker.
Right.
So bandwidth is still king. There's no doubt about it. You have content that is really the driver of that kingship.
Right.
And
this satellite show and exhibition conference is really keeping up with all these trends. And you can see the makeup. They used to do the big five satellite, the big five operators. So they don't do that anymore. Now it's new space,
Well, it's fragmented, but I think there's a lot of, you look at the low orbit.
Right.
Low orbit needs GEOs because you go LEO to GEO.
Right.
Then you've got MEO and MEO to GEO.
Right.
And so we're kind of taking a least cost routing approach. And because compute on the edge in space, it makes such a big difference on the computational patterning that you do in data science.
Right.
So, you kind of think about the reduction of cost for launch, reduction of cost through things such as 3D printing and things like that, and many other technologies. And then just when you can launch that cheaply, and then you've got all this compute capability around AI and cloud.
Right.
It's a multiplicity of growth, and it grows exponentially. It's just phenomenal.
Right. With Blue Zaccarilla, he's the Director of Innovation of the Society of Satellite Professionals International, which is also involved with the WTA, and in fact we just had the WTA Awards luncheon, which Blue is a very able host and a very able master of ceremonies. He's very well known for his very well-timed jokes.
I don't know where.
Right, but actually the SSPI, and then Luke can talk about that a little bit more, and the WTA are one of the leading trade organizations worldwide and their activities worldwide. Now, what our audience here from Asia are more interested in is actually what's your involvement with satellite? I know you've been doing this for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So give us a bit of history of that.
Well, thank you, Virgil, and again, thanks for the opportunity, and we thank you for the good work that you guys do with your publications and your research and your journalism. What both of those organizations do are really bring people in the industry together to share best practices, to network, and to develop talent. But probably more important, we promote the industry.
Right.
We promote the industry to new and different markets as well as existing markets.
Right.
So we like to think that we're sort of the tip of the spear
right.
in terms of taking the message out into the world.
Right. And you've been associated with satellite how many years now, the WTA and SPI?
For a couple of, since the dark ages.
Yeah, at least 25 years, because that's as far back as
over 25,
and
into the 90s.
Yeah, and then for those of you who haven't been here, there used to be the gala. That was the event, right?
That's right.
It was a black tie affair, very formal, but also cordial and friendly atmosphere.
Yeah.
But now scaled on that back a little bit right now. So, and then you have this awards luncheon, which is about the same as before. Talk about the activities that you do here at the satellite.
Well, with World Teleport Association, this is probably the premier event that we just finished, the awards luncheon, Teleport Awards for Excellence. Just about every teleport operator in the world is in this room for this event, celebrating the industry and the achievements of the year. On the SSPI side, the other organization, tonight we'll actually be having our Hall of Fame induction.
Right.
We run the Satellite Industry Hall of Fame.
Right.
And we induct people from all over the world who have lifetime achievement and are recognized by their peers. And that's kind of replaced the gala. It's kind of our blue chip event where the CEOs of the industry gather to watch one of their peers be inducted. And it's a pretty serious event,
right?
Unlike this thing where we just tell a lot of jokes and have a lot of fun.
Right. Well, you always add some levity to it. I think
try.
Makes it a lot more, and you are a master of that, I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you also do panels, right? There's going to be a panel later on.
Yeah,
Talk
we actually on the World Teleport Association side, we Access Intelligence, who runs the conference here, allows us to program several panels on the ground segment. So again, we bring speakers from all over the world in to talk about issues like multi-layer connectivity and things that are highly relevant. We also run the New York Space Business Roundtable.
Right.
Every third Wednesday of the month, which you've been kind enough to promote for us, where we bring together the finance community and the commercial space community. So we've got a lot of things like that going on.
And we're here with Tim Jackson. He's the Senior Vice President for Sales and Marketing of Globecast for the Americas.
Yes, sir. Globecast
is a very well-known company in the industry, and actually Tim and I go way back. We have a running joke, sort of. For full disclosure, I've known Tim for almost 25 years or more. He was at the Discovery, and I was in the teleport business with Asia Broadcast Center, which hosted the facilities of Discovery Channel. He built that facility in Singapore.
Yep.
Yeah, in the 90s.
94, 95.
Right. So, and you've been coming here to the satellite show since, right?
Well, probably 10 years before that as well, because I've been in this business a long, long time.
Right. So talk about that, because our viewers in Asia are kind of interested. Some of them still can't travel. There's still some restrictions. How has this show changed? And every time you come here, what do you expect out of it?
Well, I will say that Broadcast Asia and Communicasia is one of my favorite shows in the entire world. And so they have that going for them there, which is a fantastic show.
Right.
This is really a subset of that. So the satellite show here focuses exclusively on satellite communications.
Right.
And there's been a tremendous evolution over the years since really my business, media, kind of uses satellite a lot less than it used to, and a lot of our frequencies are being taken away by other technologies. But this is still a very important show, and satellite is still a very important technology for us to meet with vendors and customers and see friends.
Right. And you haven't missed one yet, right?
I don't think I've missed one in a long time.
Since I was with Asia Broadcast Center, I see you and that's the running joke that we've had. It's not a show until we see each other, right?
Exactly.
Then it's officially a show.
Officially a show, yeah.
Right. Now, so Tim, you've really got a pulse on the broadcast field. So talk about that. Talk about what trends you see and how Globecast is leveraging that.
Sure. Well, in the U.S., which is the primary region I work in, we've seen 3/5 of our C-band satellite capacity removed for 5G technologies. But the industry really hasn't missed a beat, because efficiencies in modulation and the reduction of SD in favor of single HD channels has really allowed the industry to kind of moderate the amount of capacity that's needed. But it has put pressure on KU capacity. But we've been saying back in 2018, when it was announced that the FCC would be reducing C-band satellite capacity for 5G, that this would be the death of video for satellite. Right. And it honestly has not changed much. There has not been a widespread or wholesale move to other technology from satellite, but they are being complemented by other things like point-to-point fiber, IP technologies, a lot of new things like SRT that have become much more mainstream.
Lot of
Zixi,
innovations,
all sorts of things. So we're able to use all of these as separate tools, but still the satellite distribution remains very important, particularly for global markets.
So you think the satellite portion of the broadcast is shrinking, or just going into other?
Well, it's being used for other things. I think media and television distribution can be handled across multiple technologies a lot easier than it used to be able to. So. It's a combination of two things. Both the satellite industry is moving into using satellite for things other than media, and media is realizing that there are other tools other than satellite that can be used as well.
He's the CEO of GAPSAT. That's his regular day job, but he's also the president of the APSCC, the Asia Pacific Satellite Communications Council. And actually, this video is it's also for the benefit of APSCC members and all the viewers in Asia and all over the world who aren't here in satellite. And I've been attending satellite about almost 20 years, a little over 20 years, and Gregg has been attending even longer than that. So, Gregg, you've been attending Satellite for a long time now, I'm sure. And what's the significance of Satellite, the exhibition, the conference, to you personally and also in your work?
Okay, so I've been attending for, I would say, shockingly, more than 30 years. And I would say also that Satellite is probably the largest pure play satellite and space show that I attend, and I think that takes place in the Western world every year. There are probably significantly larger ones that are shows that are held in China, for example, but not a show that has such a widespread international attendance and participation. So this is the gotta be, or what is it, must-see TV? This is the place that you've got to be every year, because this is, if you want to do one-stop shop, to meet with this wide range of suppliers, customers, colleagues, friends, for networking and so forth, it's the place to go. And it's fantastic because it's come bouncing back, I would think bigger than it's ever been.
Right.
And it's great. It's now that the pandemic has really wound down, to be able to get together. And it was interesting because there were, I would say, 5 people I saw wearing masks.
Right.
And it's refreshing not to have to go through the rigmarole, and I hope no one gets sick afterwards. But this is it's a great venue. It's a convenient location when they hold it in Washington itself, as opposed to someplace out in the burbs. The weather's been reasonably good, and the attendance has been awesome. So
right, and it's close to the beginning of the year, the first quarter, just to set things up for the whole year,
Yeah, very much.
This is actually this is my second stop. Actually, so I usually started the PTC in Hawaii.
Yes.
And then that's a little bit more kind of laid back conference.
Well,
you're associated with that too, Gregg. You are a board member, aren't you?
I used to be a board member, and
Right.
maybe someday with your vote, I will be again. But okay, that's a good comparison.
Right.
So I was in Hawaii for PTC in January of this year, and it was very well attended. I think it was the biggest one that they've ever held. But that's not a pure play satellite space conference. That's a telecom wide,
Right.
and it's probably significantly more undersea fiber cables and other technologies,
Right.
with satellite being a component of the ecosystem. But this one is focused on our industry, and it's got our players,
Right.
and it's much larger,
Right.
in every sense.
And all the other shows are the same. They're either broadcasts, or, different verticals. But here, it's all in here, right?
It is all in here.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you did mention that it's coming back after the pandemic, and I think the statistics bears that out. Actually, the organizers have said even last year that they've already that's the highest attendance, about 11,000, and they
Wow.
probably exceeded that this year.
I'm sure.
300 exhibitors, and I've been around the booths, etc. Everybody was quite happy with the foot traffic.
Yeah.
Seems much busier than last year and the previous year. Because they've had 2 since the pandemic cut off the last satellite in 2020.
The shocking cutoff in the middle of actual experience.
show.
Yeah.
Right. So, what are your key takeaways from this show, this particular edition?
I don't know that I could be so glib as to just limit the trends to a handful of key trends, but I could characterize a couple of hot button topics that I've observed here, and there have been sort of buzzwords for the last last year or two, and increasingly the focus of a lot of the discussion and industry developments. First of all, one of the things that there was quite a bit of discussion about here is the increasing integration and cooperation between the satellite industry and telcos. It has been the aspiration of our industry, I think, for decades, to work more closely with our big brothers in the terrestrial universe. It's estimated that satellites represents less than 1% of the total the total revenues of the telecom industry globally writ large. And even though we keep growing, they grow even faster. So it's been a kind of a balance there. But the great news is that in the last, I think, 5 years, there's been a concerted effort, not only from the satellite industry, which of course is there, but also from the telco side, to kind of be able to work cooperatively and develop standards that enable the integration of satellite communications infrastructure, networks, technology, and services into the general offerings that the telcos provide, and particularly the mobile telcos.
Right.
And through the work that's been done, satellites were always kind of like a odd relative that were parts. We provided parts of the network, but we did it in an awkward fashion. We weren't seamlessly integrated into their offerings, and we were an afterthought only where they couldn't do it for themselves in remote areas of the world. I think there's a much greater interest and excitement about us being part of their story, their service offerings now, from their perspective. And that's really exciting. I wasn't there, but in Barcelona at the Mobile World
Congress.
Yeah, the buzz that I heard was that not only were there a lot of satellite operators and companies and vendors there, but that the telcos that predominate that conference had on their booths references to and even the word satellite and examples of where they're using satellite technology to expand their coverage and their offerings. So I think this is really very exciting. Part of that, though I don't think the largest reason for it, is another trend that's a hot button topic here and elsewhere, which is direct to device. So it's been kind of described as the holy grail, the idea that somehow you could take your unmodified cell phone and you could communicate directly to a satellite. In the past, it's only been possible to do that using a special cell phone or doing a very expensive one with a different antenna and using different frequencies and so forth. But there are now the better part of half a dozen and growing list of affiliations between satellite operators and mobile operators to extend the range of their services and provide restoration communication and emergency communication and communication when you're just far away from wherever there's a cell tower. So that's caused the cellular industry to be excited because now they can say that we really are capable of providing services ubiquitously. Before it was just you have to be in the right area and have the right intensity of signal and so forth. So this is, and it hasn't actually begun, but it's very exciting, and there are a lot of different approaches that are being undertaken, new satellite systems that are being launched with giant antennas to be able to make the link possible with the handheld customer premise equipment. And so, but that feeds that relationship again with telcos. So that's a recurring theme. The other thing, I was actually at a session today that I thought underscored the other dimension, which is a real concern that's growing across the entire world and across the telecom world and across the satellite world, but that's security. And it's network security on a lot of different levels. A lot of attention is being paid to it, both in the military and in the civil communications, and we all care about it because it affects our privacy and the protection of our data and our identities and so on and so forth. But one thing that I came across that I thought was particularly interesting at this conference was the discussion of how, as we integrate to a greater degree with those telcos, the telcos are demanding to review all of the approaches that we undertake to maintain the security of our networks. So when our networks attach to their networks, we don't corrupt their communications. And so that just makes us work harder and achieve what we need to do on our own for our own services. But it's really great that we can cooperate even on that level. But one thing that I thought was particularly interesting is that some of the satellite guys were saying that our burden is, in a sense, twice as great as the telco burden I don't know if this is somewhat of an exaggeration, but the reason is that we can be hacked two places. One on the ground at the ground station, the Earth stations, the antennas, and the other is in space at the satellite. Whereas they can only be hacked on their ground system because that's where they're at. And even, for example, there was a big hack. Was it early last year? It was. It was shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine that I think it was Viasat was hacked, and they were not hacked in space. They were hacked at the terminals on the ground. And so that really brought to the fore that we need to be looking and vigilant, looking up and down in order to achieve this kind of security. So I think that's another area that's increasingly of interest to the operators that are providing services and the manufacturers and service providers that are actually providing the capability to secure these networks. So it's an opportunity as well as a challenge.
Right. And going back to your the telco connection with satellite and the increasing interest in the telco community, we might see more telco people coming in the next few years, you think?
That would be terrific. I think that one of the things that we as APSCC and our counterparts around the world, other satellite associations, and organizations like this one that puts on the satellite show, one of the things that we've always wanted to have more of is a greater dialogue with our customer communities. Because at the end of the day, in order to attract people to come to these conferences, there needs to be the additional dimension of having the outsider business, not just the inside of satellite kind of business. And that's achieved by having companies that are not satellite service providers, manufacturers, launch service providers, or equipment manufacturers. It's the real world companies that depend on satellite communications for their own internal business networks and so forth. So yeah, I think that's a trend that we've seen somewhat greater at this conference, and hopefully it will continue.
Right. What do you think about the new space? Having more of a presence.
One of the things that many of us had observed, I think, for a long time is that our industry was a significantly graying industry. It was a good old boys club, first of all. That's I think that there's a larger number of women in the industry, which is always a good thing. I think that we are seeing a lot of young blood, exciting companies, new space companies, obviously. But I think, in part, to his credit, one of the things that was a catalyst for this was Elon Musk. And, putting the buzz back in Buzz Lightyear. I mean, the reality is that there was a perception, I think, not among us because we knew how cool this industry was, but among the telco industry and the general public that we were some kind of like 1970s technology that maybe had some advances, but it really wasn't on the cutting edge. It was the past. It was necessary, but it was not the future. And hopefully someday, between fiber and 5G, 6G, the world will be covered in who needs satellites. But that, of course, was wrong. But I think that space is now clearly sexy again, and it's attracting a lot of people who in the past would have gone into other professions, and they're coming here. So, plus they're doing some really cool new stuff, and that's the key. What they're doing is not just youth per se, but they are not wedded to the processes, the form factors, the approaches of the old guard. And so they don't know. They don't know how it was done, and they come in and they reinvent the wheel, but they make it more efficient and make it faster and cheaper and with more capability. And that's true, I think, on the manufacturing side of satellites and components, and it's true on the launch side, getting into space, and it's true in the service side, and it's certainly true on the content side. So the truth is that things are better than ever, which is great.